Rome's unhinged emperor, who thought he would never die, had brutal hours so extreme that the world would remember him forever. Subscribe now, because it's about to get crazier. The immortal emperor. Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, also known as Caligula, woke up in the morning with no idea that he had roughly 4 hours left to live. At just the age of 28 years old, he had already burned through the empire's treasury, declared war on ocean, and also considered appointing his favorite horse, Anchises, to the Senate as a voting member. Yes, you got that right, he literally chose his horse as one of the most important voting members in the government. The thing is that his reign had started with so much promise after Tiberius died in 37 AD. That's when Caligula took power, and Romans celebrated in the streets, thinking that they were a young, energetic emperor from the beloved Germanicus bloodline. The first few months were quite promising, and for sure he recalled exiles, reduced taxes, and also put on spectacular games that everyone would remember. So far, he was acting like a normal human being. But then, something within him snapped. Maybe it was mental illness, or simply the severe illness that he suffered 7 months into his reign. Or maybe it was the power that simply blinded him or revealed who he had already been, whatever the cause was. The Caligula who emerged after his recovery was a completely different person. He was cruel, paranoid, and convinced that he was immortal because he survived. From there, he didn't just execute people who opposed them, he made it entertainment. Senators were forced to run alongside his chariot for miles in their togas. He'd even invite fathers to a lavish banquet immediately after executing their sons, watching their faces for any signs of grief that he could find amusing. He even opened a brothel inside the imperial palace and forced senators' wives to work there, charging their humiliated husbands for the privilege. His spending made modern access look pale. He even built 2 massive barges on Lake Nemi, featuring marble floors, plumbing, and a garden. But even more extreme, he constructed a temporary floating bridge across the Bay of Baie, nearly 2 miles long, just so he could ride across it wearing armor supposedly taken from Alexander the Great's tomb, proving to everyone that he could actually walk on water and that he was God. The conspiracy. Then came early 41 AD, when virtually everyone in Rome wanted Caligula dead. The question wasn't whether someone would kill him, but who would do it first. There were many plots that were already in motion, including one led by some of the closest people around him that Caligula himself discovered and brutally crushed just weeks before his death. The successful conspiracy was about Cassius Chaerea, a tribune in the Praetorian Guard. Chaerea was everything that Caligula wasn't. He was a decorated military veteran who'd served under Germanicus, who was Caligula's own father. He even fought in actual battles, not the ones that were just made to make himself look good. Moreover, what's interesting is that this guy earned his rank through competence and not inheritance. Caligula was absolutely delighted in humiliating him in front of other soldiers. He would call him effeminate, questioning his courage, mocking his voice, and worst of all, when Chaerea approached for the daily password, which was a second military ritual, Caligula would give him words like Priapus or Venus, deliberately weird sexual references that were designed to embarrass a respected officer. For a Roman military man, honor was everything. Chaerea could have endured personal insults if Caligula had been a competent ruler, but he was watching Rome being destroyed right before his eyes. His personal dignity was also being destroyed every single day. Then he began recruiting soldiers carefully, other Praetorian officers who had been insulted, senators who lost family members to Caligula's purges, even some of the imperial freedmen who had access to the palace and knew the emperor's schedule. This conspiracy involved at least a dozen active participants, and a dozen more who knew everything yet said nothing because they were way too scared. However, they needed the perfect location and the perfect moment, and that's where the Palatine Games came, which became the perfect place for them to initiate this assassination. I'm doing a $100 Amazon gift card giveaway to celebrate when this channel reaches 1,000 subscribers. No action is required to enter. I'll randomly pick a winner once we hit the milestone. If you want to follow the journey or see the winner announcement, feel free to subscribe. Warning signs. Just the night before, Caligula had terrible dreams. Ancient sources even report that he dreamed about standing in heaven next to Jupiter's throne when God kicked him down to earth. He woke up disturbed enough to mention it to his wife, Cassonia. She begged him to skip the game, and his toothsayers, taken seriously in Rome, examined the omen, and warned him that the next day was quite suspicious for public appearance. Even some of his loyal German bodyguards seemed nervous, though either from supernatural intuition or because they had heard the rumors about killing Caligula. However, Caligula was quiet and arrogant and overruled his anxiety because he thought that he was immortal. He'd faced down the conspiracy before and crushed them, and this was nothing different now. He is divine now. What could mere mortals do to a god? Besides, the games were in his honor, and he had never missed an opportunity to be worshipped before, so he went, even bringing his wife and his younger daughter Julia and his uncle Claudius. But things were only going to get worse from here. But before we reveal how Caligula actually died, subscribe to the channel because it is about to get interesting from here. The Killing Ground. The Palatine Games weren't held in a massive Colosseum, as it happened in Rome, and they wouldn't be built for another 4 decades. Instead, they took place in a temporary theater complex within very carefully designed underground passages that connected different areas. These passages were narrow, poorly lit, and isolated from the crowds above. Chaerea had studied the layout quite carefully and positioned the men at every exit. Some were conspirators, others were simply following orders from their commander, not realizing that they were participating in this assassination until blood started flowing. The plan required isolating Caligula from his German bodyguards, fanatically loyal troops who had fought with his father and would die protecting him. The games proceeded normally for hours, and gladiators fought. Their athletes competed with each other. Caligula watched from the imperial box. He was making his usual cruel commentary, occasionally ordering someone to be thrown to the beasts for his amusement. Around midday, he even announced that he was returning to the palace for lunch and a bath. This was the moment where things would take a different turn. As Caligula left, Chaerea made sure that he took a different route from his German bodyguard. A few co-conspirators created a minor distraction and staged an argument with a drunk spectator, according to past records, which caused problems that pulled the Germans' attention away for just 60 seconds. That was all that Chaerea needed. As soon as Caligula walked through the dim underground passage, where he was probably already thinking about his bath and whatever fresh humiliation he would do for dinner, Chaerea stepped out of the shadows. The narrow corridor meant only a few people could walk ahead. Caligula, who had maybe 1 or more attendants there, and the beast were blocking the path ahead. From there, he said to Caligula that he needed to countersign for today's watch, which was a normal request from the tribune of the guard. Caligula stopped, probably already forming whatever joke he wanted to make about passwords this time, but that momentary pause was fatal. Chaerea drew his gladius, which was a short Roman sword designed for close combat, and he brought it down hard towards Caligula's neck and shoulders. Either through his bad aim or deliberate choice, the blow wasn't instantly fatal. It cut deep into Caligula's shoulder and collarbone, which was a devastating wound that dropped him to his knees, but didn't kill him on the spot. Caligula screamed, not in the normal cry of an actor in his beloved game, but the raw animal and brutalistic scream of a man who suddenly understood that he was about to die. He tried to stand to run, but his legs wouldn't work properly, and blood poured down his chest. Then Cornelius Sabinus emerged from behind with his sword already drawn. He stabbed Caligula in the back, and the blade started punching through the muscle and pierced his lungs. Caligula fell forward, watching himself in his hands as his blood now pooled rapidly beneath him on the stone floor. The battle. What happened next transformed an assassination into a full-blown battle or a massacre. More conspirators appeared, including Cassius Longinus, Bacolianus, and others whose names history didn't even record. They formed a circle around the fallen empire and just started stabbing. This wasn't a clean battle. It was the efficient murder of Julius Caesar, where each conspirator got one deliberate strike. This was frenzied, almost unreal violence. Swords rose and fell again and again, and some blows hit Caligula's body while others hit the ground or walls as men pushed and shoved to get their turns. Imagine how angry these men were at Caligula to be able to kill him even after he was killed. Ancient historian Josephus, writing a generation later with access to eyewitnesses, reported that Caligula received 30 wounds, not 23. Some were defensive, shallow cuts on the hands and arms where he tried to protect himself, but most were deep, penetrating strikes that delivered long after he stopped moving or making sounds. The disturbing thing about this whole assassination is that Caligula remained conscious for most of it. Multiple sources record him crying out, saying that he is still alive, as if he were saying that his divine status would somehow stop the blades. However, it didn't. If anything, it made the conspirators stab him even harder and faster, with years of hatred boiling up, and Caligula was already bringing his wrath onto them for years. When they finally stopped, Caligula's body was so mutilated that witnesses couldn't even identify it. His face was destroyed, his limbs were nearly severed, and the marble floors and walls were painted with blood and other things that had been inside him just moments before. The aftermath of this assassination was even worse. The conspirators weren't just eliminating an emperor, they were trying to erase his entire bloodline. Within that hour, they hunted down his wife. She hadn't done anything except marry Caligula, and that crime was enough. They found her in palace rooms holding 1-year-old Julia Drusilla, who was Caligula's only legitimate child, Lucian. They disagreed on who exactly killed them and how they killed them, but in the end, the results were the same. Caesonia was also stabbed to death, and the baby was killed by having her head smashed against the wall, which was a brutal method that ensured no rival could claim she had survived and use her as the rallying point. The entire imperial family was gone after that afternoon, just 3 murders that the conspirators genuinely wanted to do in order to save Rome. While Caligula was being destroyed and his family was eliminated, his uncle Claudius was the family joke, and everyone mocked him as stupid. He was hiding behind a curtain in the palace. The Praetorian Guard found him there, shaking and probably musing that he was about to die too. Instead, the Praetorians gave him the role of emperor because they needed an emperor, and Claudius was the only living male of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Claudius was terrified and shocked as he suddenly found himself ruling the greatest empire on earth. Here is the final twist. He turned out to be surprisingly competent. He even conquered Britain, built infrastructure, and changed the legal system while ruling for 13 years before being poisoned by his 4th wife, like everyone else is saying. The man who was thought to be an idiot became one of Rome's most effective emperors. The conspirators were mostly dead within a year, and Caeria was forced to commit suicide within months, killing the very regime that he created. Caligula ruled for around 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days, and that time was enough for him to nearly bankrupt the empire, murder countless Romans for entertainment, and even declare himself a living god. His death solved nothing. It didn't restore much, and it didn't even end imperial tyranny. Within a generation, Nero would be burning Rome, and others would be executing senators for fun. What do you think about his brutal final hours? Let us know in the comments down below, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.